Ladies and gentlemen, the 2019 King Vidor Award winner, Alfred Molina.
This is terribly overwhelming. This is very overwhelming. I'm one of those actors that gets nominated quite a few times, but never goes home with anything. Yeah, it's true. Oh, I'm not complaining. You know, I get to go to the parties and stuff. You know, it's not like it's a terrible life I'm living. But you know, when I was a young actor, I built this little shelf. I was going to put all my awards. Because I thought I was the dog's bollocks, you know, I thought I was fantastic. So I've got this shelf and I would go to these awards and then I'd come back with nothing, and so I started filling up the shelf with, you know, little tchotchkes and ornaments, you know, little hummels all hanging around them. I did actually, I'm telling a small lie for the sake of a good story, but I did win one award once. It was years ago in the UK, there was a trade magazine called Plays and Players. And it was a very small, rather niche market little magazine. I think about 55 people read it. And they had awards. And in 1978, I won the Most Promising Newcomer Award. Yeah. Everyone says, oh, I'm not that old. And the prize was a year's subscription to the magazine. And 2 months after I won my award, the magazine went bust. So that gives you some idea of my sort of, you know, my kind of track record with awards. But there's something very odd about receiving an award, because it's very flattering and terribly, terribly moving. Actually, I'm feeling rather verklempt at the moment about it, actually, because it means a great deal, especially when you look back on some things that I've done, and it took me a little bit by surprise. I'm sitting there watching this, it took me a little bit by surprise, you know, because I thought, oh shit, I didn't know I was in that one. I thought I'd turn that one down. And there I am, so, you know. But there's at least 3 of those movies that Tom Wilkinson turned down, so I'm really grateful to him. So I'm kind of, you know, really happy about that. He hasn't got one of these. But it's very flattering, and thank you. You know, we love, it's great when the work gets acknowledged and when there's a genuine sense that people have enjoyed the work, and that means more to me than anything else. So I'm very, very thrilled to receive this, and I want to thank everyone at the festival for thinking of me, for considering these movies, for really even giving me the time of day, frankly. It's really terrific, and so thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, Wendy, it was going to be 50, but I wanted to tip the driver. Poorly. So this is probably not the question you get first when you do these interviews. It turns out you're English.
Imagine my surprise.
Yeah. So I don't remember when I learned that you were English, but I had decided years ago when I discovered this that you were something else. I don't know quite what. I'm presuming I'm not the first person to say this to you.
No, you're not. It's funny because I've been living and working in the States now since the very early 90s. I came out here in the 80s to do a couple of TV jobs and stuff, so I was kind of going backwards and forwards. But I came to live here in 93, actually. It was, you know, end of 92, 93. And I started working. I wanted to be an American actor. You know, I'd fallen in love with American films when I was a teenager. I fell in love with American cars, American music. I really wanted to be here. And it took me till I was 40 to save up the fare, but I got here. And I started, and I didn't want to be, one of those British actors that sit by the pool at the Chateau Marmont waiting for the phone to ring. I wanted to kind of get my sleeves rolled up and get stuck in, and so I just said yes to everything. And I was always a character actor. I was always, I was playing Eastern European thugs when I was at drama school. So to play kind of gangsters and cowboys and villains in westerns, that was fine by me. And I think there is now a lot of people who are taken by surprise when they find out I'm originally British. I used to have this joke where I'd say I just do the English accent, to impress people, because really I don't like this, but you can't do that gag anymore. So, but it's it is. I think people are surprised, but at the same time, it has never really worked in my disfavour.
So, born in London?
Born in London, yeah. My parents were immigrants to England. My father was a refugee from the Civil War in Spain, and he arrived in the UK just in time for World War II. My mother...
So he fought the Spanish Civil War and World War II?
Yeah, he did.
And he was on the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War?
Yeah, he couldn't go back to Spain. He was on one of General Franco's blacklists. And my mother emigrated to England from Italy. She arrived in about 1947. And they were working... My mum was cleaning rooms and my dad was a waiter in a hotel restaurant. That's where they met.
So your accent now actually is not quite, I've heard you discuss accents, and English accents you can identify more than just region, you can identify station.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of information in a British accent to another Brit. When I always argue that when Americans talk to each other and they hear each other's regional accents, you get a sense of where that person might be from, but it doesn't really tell you very much about their education, about their social standing or whatever. In England, as soon as you open your mouth, there's a whole raft of information coming out, that people are kind of judging you on, where you're educated, what kind of education you might have had, what you do for a living, where you live. It's a very subtle, sort of nuanced part of that little thing we like to call the class system, which is still very healthily, still very relevant.
We have a significant amount of, obviously, of economic inequality here, but it's very different in England, right? The class system feels different in England than it does.
Yeah, it's very much based on family and history. I have friends who are really rather posh and very kind of upper class, and they're as broke as they're poorer than church mice. And then you meet other people who have had no education at all, and they kind of got very, very successful. Things are changing, but there was a time, especially when I was training to be an actor in the late 60s, early 70s. I was told quite actively and quite seriously that I had to adapt my accent because otherwise I wouldn't get any work. So I started, I had to have like elocution lessons and all that kind of thing. So it's I'm not quite sure if it's the same now. I doubt it.
But so what we've heard from you as an actor since Raiders of the Lost Ark, when you're yourself at least, or when you're playing someone English, that's not the accent you had when you were a kid.
No. I'm not quite sure what my accent was like. I do a sort of rather bad impersonation of what I think my accent was like, and I always end up sounding like Ray Winston. I think I talk a little bit like that. I want to be an actor, But I think now I'm not quite sure what my accent. A lot of my English friends say that my accent sounds quite American to them, but I don't think it does.
Your accent sounds
to them a little Americanized.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think my T's and D's have softened.
So I was sitting next to you trying to get a gauge as you watched. That was the first time you'd seen that clip reel?
Yeah, and very nice too.
What is your reaction seeing yourself in these movies? I thought very wisely sort of put together to show your range as we go from something heavy and dramatic to something light and fun and adventurous. But how do you react to seeing yourself?
Well, the more recent stuff, I think, oh yeah, that, you know, I recognise him, you know, and I remember, but the early stuff, like looking at that clip from Raiders, and some of the early stuff, it's a little bit like looking at a relative that you only meet at weddings. You know, we've all got those cousins that you only meet when someone in the family gets married. Oh hi, Dave. Yeah, hi Dave. Yeah, long time no see. How you been? You know, and that is, I think, didn't we meet him at the funeral, Auntie so-and-so's funeral? You know, that's the kind of thing. I kind of vaguely know who he is, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, since you mentioned Raiders, I want to get back to your parents, but but let's talk about Raiders for a moment, because how do you get that part? And I learned a whole bunch in listening to you talk about Raiders that I had no idea, other than the leads, mostly British production.
Yeah, Harrison Ford and Karen Allen were the only two American actors in the show. Everyone else was cast out of London and I think Paris. The reason for that was because in those days, this was like we shot the movie in 1979, and in those days the British film industry was in a real decline. The studios were empty. Shepperton, they were shooting the occasional commercial there, and that was about it. So, trying to make the industry still viable, they were offering incredible discounts to American production companies. And so Paramount moved their whole production to London, took over Elstree Studios, and so we were all cast, every actor apart from the two leads, we were all cast in London. And I got a message from my agent saying, do you want to go and meet Steven Spielberg for his new film? And you know, of course I said, let me think of it. No, I said yes. And I remember that he was staying at the Inn on the Park, which is a very, very smart hotel in London. And he was staying in a suite, and I turned up. I had an 11 o'clock meeting, and I turned up very early. I bought a new shirt, a beautiful shirt, but I was sweating so much it ruined the shirt. I sweated right through it. It was summertime, and I'm waiting. I'm ushered up into the suite to meet Stephen, and as the doors are opening, Stephen is walking out and saying goodbye to Dustin Hoffman, who apparently had just popped in to say hello. So at one point, it's so funny. So yeah, this is my first movie. I've never done a movie before. I was green as cabbage, and bless his heart, Steven Spielberg goes, "Oh, Alfred, you know Dustin?" It's like, yeah, we had drinks at the Polo Lounge just the other week. And I'm sort of going, no, how do they? And they said their Cheerios and left, and I walked in, and it was I was so nervous, I couldn't believe it, I was so nervous. And we was talking about the movie, and he said, can you do a Latin American accent? And I said, yeah, I can do that. Are you sure? Yeah, I can do that, okay. And then he sends me off, and the meeting comes to an end. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the movie, but there's a...
Did he asked you if you could, he didn't ask you to do it?
No, he just asked me if I could. He took me at my word, thank goodness. I then went off and did the research. But as I was leaving, saying my goodbyes, feeling, pretty good, it went well. As I'm leaving, Stephen just said, "Oh, Alfred, you don't have a thing about spiders, do you?" And I thought he meant those little ones that crawl out of the bath, when the summertime. We call them daddy longlegs in England, those garden spiders. And as I'm leaving, I'm being shoved out of the room because there's other people wanting to come in. And I just kind of open my shoulders, come in, no, spiders, no problem. And then, 2 weeks later, I've got 40 tarantulas on my back.
And do you have a problem with spiders?
No, I didn't. But I wasn't expecting, the tarantulas took me a little bit by surprise.
What was that? How long were you working on Raiders?
We did a week in London, and then joy of joys. You have to understand, this was like so many firsts for me on this. We did a week in London, and then we shot a week on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And here are the firsts. My first film, first time flying to America, first time flying first class. First time working on an international movie with international actors, and the first time I actually got paid. So, and also, more importantly, and I've thanked Stephen for this many times, publicly and privately, my daughter was about to be born during the filming. She was born just after we finished filming, but my then partner was pregnant with our daughter, and we were broke. We were absolutely broke. I'd been working in the theatre, working for Union Scale. Suddenly this movie comes. I'd been working for like £45 a week. Just to give you a vague idea, £45 a week. This movie comes along and pays me £1,000 for the whole 2 weeks. You can imagine. It saved our bacon. I mean, we had our daughter in a modicum of comfort. I was able to pay for decorating this little spare room that we had, and you know, it was the most amazing thing to happen.
But no residuals, right?
No residuals, not a penny. Cash prizes, Nancy, cash prizes. No, because that's why they came to England, because we're cheap. Eager and cheap.
Let me do this, because he asked if you can do a South American accent, and there's I'm the host at Turner Classic Movies. There is an actor who, for the last 10, 12 years, a classic actor who I think you embody in many ways, and I hope you take this as a compliment. I suspect you've heard it before, but you are sort of a modern day Anthony Quinn.
Oh, thank you. He was my hero.
Was he your hero before, or did it sort of occur to you that, hey, I am sort of doing the thing that Hollywood had him do?
No. I remember seeing. My dad was a big fan of Anthony Quinn, and we used to watch his movies. And there used to be a slot on Sunday nights on English TV when I was growing up where they would show kind of American movies, and Anthony was always popping up on these films, playing Mexicans, playing Indians, playing all kinds of characters. And there was something about Anthony Quinn that was so big and boisterous and energetic and kind of just energized, just energetic, but at the same time completely authentic and completely real. That he didn't look like an actor. There's a great scene in Lawrence of Arabia, which I think is the movie that really made me a lifelong fan. There's this fantastic shot. They're inside a tent, and he's talking to Lawrence, and there's a whole world outside the tent. All his followers are outside the tent, and there's this great shot where he's talking very close up, and then he turns and points to the people beyond the tent, and you see them all kind of screaming and shit. And then he comes back and he says, and he had this little wonderful line where he says, "I'm a river for my people," something like that. I'm a river to, these are my, I'm a river to my people, something like that. And it was such a powerful moment, and it was one of the 3 moments in my life when I was young, when I thought, oh, maybe I can do this, because it was just so human. There was nothing actorish about him, and that's why I loved him so much.
And now, you can get cast to play almost any ethnicity, much as he did.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was never a plan. I think I fell in. I think because I was handy with accents. I think it's because my parents had accents. I grew up in an immigrant neighbourhood in London. All my friends at school, they were sons and daughters of Irish families, West Indian, French, Portuguese, Spanish. It was a big mix. The only thing we all had in common was that we went to a Catholic school. And so I heard all these accents. And we used to, also, you got to remember, American television was a huge part of our viewing in the 50s and 60s. All the big American hit shows came over to England. So we were very used to hearing those accents. I mean, I can remember playing in the street, playing cops and robbers in the street, and borrowing lines from TV shows, and we'd all be running around kind of going, "You got me, copper!" Sort of.
I think
he's in the alley.
You think there's ever been a real bad guy who has said, "You got me, copper"? Yeah.
Well, they did on the Saturday morning.
Yeah, definitely.
They did. Yeah.
I think Quinn was, I think his parents were one Mexican and one Irish, and you have Spanish and Italian, so there's a lot of similarity there. So your dad was is working class as they did?
Yeah, he was a waiter. You know, he never quite got it when I I think my feelings about it are very sort of very loving. I love my dad, but he never quite got the notion of me being an actor. And I can remember he got me. I was never short of work when I was out of work, if you see what I mean. I always got a job waiting tables or washing up in a restaurant because he had lots of friends. All his friends were in the same business. And I remember I was working as a waiter in a restaurant where my dad had worked. And if I say so myself, I was quite a good waiter, good enough for the manager to offer me a 2-week paid course to go and train as an assistant manager. And I turned it down. Now, anyone who was looking for a career in the catering business would have jumped at the chance, but I said no thanks. You know, I've got to be free to audition. And when my dad found out, he gave me that look that you usually reserve for the lost and the mad. You know, it was a kind of a combination of condescension and disdain, and he just couldn't get it. And this is what he said. I'll never forget this. Now I'm talking in pounds now, but you'll get the idea. He said, "So this acting job, how much did they pay you?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting £15 a weekday. You know, it's the union basic." "How much are you getting here?" "Well, with tips about 35. "Wait a minute. You're making £35 a week here, but you're going over there to make 15. I said, yeah, that's, you know. I said, "Why, do you think I'm crazy?" And he went, "Yeah, but it's your life." And that broke my heart. It broke my heart at the time, but you know, he was who he was.
Did he live long enough to celebrate much of your success? And if he did, was he the kind of person to celebrate it?
Well, kind of. I'll tell you a quick story. When I did a movie called Prick Up Your Ears in 1987. 87. Thank you very much for it. I'm so glad you're here.
It's probably not true, but the key for me is just being confident.
Absolutely. It's working like a charm. And it got chosen to be the inaugural movie for the Barcelona Film Festival that year, which was a very prestigious position to be in. So we opened the festival. And of course, because of the nature of the movie, the subject matter, it was a huge, the whole Barcelona gay community came out in force to support the film, which was wonderful. And at the party after the screening, my father extricated himself from a group of young Barcelonian drag queens who were all telling him how wonderful they thought his son was. And my father finally breaks away and says, "Alfredo," he never called me Fredo, "Alfredo, there's a man over there, he's dressed as a woman, and he said to me, he thinks you are fabulous." "What does he mean?"
After he died, you found, though, that he had...
Oh, you've done your research. Yeah, the classic, it's almost a cliche, isn't it? After he passed away, I went to Barcelona for the funeral, and my father and I hadn't spoken for a while, a few years, and I turned up with my brother, and we went to his apartment and to spend some time with his widow. And my brother said something like, Has Dad got any photographs? Because I haven't got any photographs. And his widow pulled out this great big box, and there were photos and all these reviews. Amazing. I'm sorry.
He didn't know how to. He didn't know how to do it.
He didn't know how to say it. I'll tell you, here's another one of my dad's wonderful remarks. I did a play with the Royal Shakespeare Company where I was in the second half of the play. I was in drag, full drag, and I worked really hard to get the makeup right and everything. And my father came to see the play, and I said, "What did you think, Dad?" He said, "Oh, I see. It was incredible. When you were dressed up as the woman, you look just like your mother." So just as a joke, I said, "Did you think I looked sexy?" And my dad goes, "Don't be ridiculous."
One of the movies not included in that clip reel was a film released this last year. Got a couple of significant Oscar nominations. Vice, Abdication. And I was just curious because did he offered you a couple of roles?
Yeah. Adam McKay offered me. He said there are 2 parts. They're not very big, but if you fancy, because I've done some work with Adam before. I've done a couple of things on Funny or Die, for the TV, and we'd always got on. And he said, and I said, yeah, well, whatever. And he said, well, there's 2 parts. You choose. And the part of the waiter just kind of struck me as funny because is one scene you're in and out. I could do it in a morning, but also it was just the nature. It just seemed kind of it was wonderfully satirical, and I thought, well, I can do something with this, and it was it reminded me of the late Bob Hoskins, who was a friend of mine. He, towards the end of his career, before he got ill, he started doing cameos everywhere. He was popping up in all these films as doing these cameos. And he was asked in an interview why suddenly he was doing these cameos and not leading roles. And he said, the nice thing about a cameo is you turn up, you do a day's work, they're always pleased to see you, they treat you like the crown jewels, and if the movie sucks, nobody blames you. And that just struck me as a great way to live your career.
I thought maybe because it was the waiter, you also took it because it was your dad's job. Right?
Well, there was a little bit of that. I did actually at one point ask Adam, "Do you want me to do it with a Spanish accent?" And Adam said, "No, that might kind of fudge. It might fudge the joke."
Right. If you guys haven't seen Vice, it is. I think Vice is wonderful. It's a slightly divisive movie among people. Some people love it, and some people don't. And I think it's my favorite scene in Vice. It's a wonderful, wonderful scene. So I want to bounce around a little bit. So you were in right after you finished production on Raiders, maybe, but before it came out, touring in England, and then eventually at the West End on the stage, Oklahoma.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, we did the tour of Oklahoma, and then I got the part in Raiders, and then it all worked out beautifully. When I finished that, I went back and rejoined the tour, and then we opened the show in the West End.
Who'd you play?
I played Judd Fry, the bad guy.
That's Rod Steiger's role in the movie.
That's right. But here's the weird thing about that. Judd has a song, which you might be surprised to hear because it was cut. It was cut from the movie. So every other song in the show is a hit,
and everybody knows it. And they're waiting for it.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, what a beautiful. Everyone starts applauding. I'm just a girl who can applause. Everything's up to date. Applause. Every number got this kind of wonderful response. It was great. My Judd's song starts like this. Dum, dum, dum. And the first line is, the floor creaks, the door squeaks, there's a mouse a-nibbling on a broom. And it's a really kind of duo song. And I did that song every night to the sight of 3,000 people kind of going, I don't know this. It
was a sobering lesson. You don't get too big for your boots in that sort of situation.
Where shall I go here? Paul Thomas Anderson, 2 movies, right? Boogie Nights, or Boogie Nights, as my father used to say. Couldn't get that point across ever to him. Pretty sure didn't see it anyway. It's not really his speed. But that scene, so memorable. It's not just memorable because Boogie Nights is, Boogie Nights matters to so many people who care about movies.
We're going to say who care about pornography.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I wasn't quite sure where you were going with that one.
Yeah, that too, sure. Those of us who,
Thomas and Mark and John didn't know when those crackers were going to go off, so every time you see them jumping out of their skin, that's totally for real. And I'm just like swimming through it on this cocaine high, you know. And the cocaine didn't hurt either.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's not shout out to the dealer. Nice work. We had to. I'm being facetious. We had to audition cocaine. We had to find some combination of stuff that we could use that wasn't obviously not cocaine, but was going to behave decently. And so the prop man came up with this mixture, which was baby laxative. Oh, it gets worse, babes. It gets worse. Baby laxative, some kind of artificial sweetener, which gave it that kind of glistening quality that Coke apparently has, and powdered milk.
Right.
Yeah. So here's
powdered milk got the
Yeah, they got the shot. Powdered milk, how dare you? Cocaine I can live with, but powdered milk is disgusting. I'm lactose intolerant. but so Paul Thomas, he calls us all together. He said, "We got to audition this cocaine. Make sure because if it hurts or it makes you feel weird." So we're all like snorting up lines of this stuff. We're kind of going, "Yeah, that's okay. That seems okay." Until we realised that as soon as the powdered milk hit the moisture inside our nostrils, the big white bubbles kept coming out of our noses. So we're running around having competition. Who's got the biggest bubble? Look. We were like children, absolute children.
You've worked with some tremendous directors, Paul. First, there are. I'm not. It would be too much to say I'm friends with them. Our children are friends. He's got like 12 kids, but his youngest is friends. And and so I hear these stories that he's demanding, right? And he's so pleasant.
Yeah, he's a sweet man.
Right,
he's a sweet man. But he knows what he wants. He knows what he wanted. He's that fantastic combination, which I've been, touch wood, I've been very fortunate. A lot of directors I've worked with have this, which is really wonderful. It's a marvelous sense of play, a real enjoyment of seeing what other disciplines can bring to the party. But at the same time, he's impeccably prepared, which is fantastic.
Without naming names, what is a sign of a director for you that makes you uneasy as an actor?
I think it's the opposite of what I just said.
Lack of preparation.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing you want is to walk on a set and have the director say, "Okay, let's put the camera here." That's or when directors say things like, "I'm not quite sure what we're doing with this scene, but let's play around with it." And you think, wait a minute, there's like, there could be 150 people, waiting to do their thing, and I think that lack of prep and is worrying, but it's happened, as I say, it's happened rarely to me.
So is there a way to have a director say something like, "Let's play around with it," that works, meaning like maybe after you have what he knows he wants, and then, because I've told dozens of stories on TCM of great directors, Kazan, doing something a certain way, and then afterwards saying, all right, now let's have some freedom.
Yeah. A lot of directors do that. They'll give you one. They say, okay, you're right, let's do one take just for you. Just do what you want. But I've noticed that those takes are very rarely used. I think it's like a kind of, make the actor feel good. It's like throwing a bit of fish to a performing seal. But I worked with one director who shall be nameless, who gave me, I think, one of the most unplayable, but one of the greatest notes I ever got. I was playing a bad guy, and I had to storm into this room and threaten to kill someone. And this director said to me, Alfred, when you walk into the room, you are crazy, you're mad, you're jealous, you want to kill him, you want to kill him, you want to cut him up, you want to rip his body apart, you want his blood everywhere on the floor, you want to drink his blood, you want to kill him, but only with your eyes. Okay, leave that with me. I'll see what I can do.
Great note, thanks.
Isn't that a great note? It's a great note, isn't it?
So we finally, this year on TCM, we got to interview Robert Redford, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said prior to doing Ordinary People, which was his first movie, 1980, released, came out the year before Raiders, he couldn't have known the difference between any kind of lens. He didn't really know anything, because he thought that if he invested too much time and energy in watching what the director did, it would have taken away from his performance and his full commitment and investment in playing the part. And he always felt if he ever did that, he was betraying the other actors. You're going to direct something, right?
Yeah, hopefully this year I'll be directing a small movie.
Does that ring true to you at all? Is that?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think that's why I'm hoping very strongly that I'll be able to get the money for the film without actually having to be in it, which is often what happens when an actor, with a certain amount of celebrity wants to direct a film. Very often, the money's contingent on being in the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a hard. Directing, as we all know, directing is hard enough. And acting is pretty tough too sometimes, but to do both, I think, I'm amazed when actors can do it. I've worked with a couple of actors who've directed and starred in the film that they've directed. Stanley Tucci being one. I did a couple of films for him, and it's really, really hard. There's a kind of, you have to sort of split yourself in a way, and it happened with Stanley that that he was being bombarded with demands as a director, and so we all felt a little we felt a bit bad about kind of coming up with our issues about
right, like we should cut him a break.
Yeah, so we sort of left him alone a little bit, but yeah, it's hard.
Last night as I was prepping to talk to you, one of the things that I did was watch that unbelievable 17-minute scene. It's really a short in an anthology movie in Coffee and Cigarettes, right? In Jim Jarmusch's movie with you and Steve Coogan. And my God, so scripted, not scripted?
It was partly scripted.
Yeah.
We came together the day before, and Jim Jarmusch, the director, had. Here's an example. I'm now going to contradict myself. Here's an example of a director who didn't have a scene, but in a way it kind of worked beautifully because it was part of the spirit of the whole movie. He had this idea, and he said, I've got this idea about you playing yourselves, a heightened version obviously, but playing yourselves, and you discover something that you have a connection, a family connection. And so we went off and started talking about it, and I happened to say that my dad, one of his hobbies was genealogy. He was a bit of, he was really into kind of like family trees and all that. And I think that gave Jim a starting point. So he basically said, in this scene, you have to tell Steve that you're related, and you want to be, you want to have a kind of familial relationship. And he wrote a couple of little lines here and there, but most of it was improvised. But I've got to be honest, most of it was Stephen. I'm not a great improviser. What I'm good at is I'm good at going along with it. I remember the rule about never say no. But all that lovely stuff in the scene where he's showing off the coat, it's the Vivienne Westwood coat and stuff like that. That was all Steve.
Was it Steve's idea or Jim's idea to make him so, I mean, you talk about a heightened version of himself. I mean, he doesn't come off looking great. He comes off looking brilliant, right? But I mean, intentionally, he's the monster.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he's actually a very, very nice man.
Right.
And I think what he was leaning towards was a character that he's very famous for in England, which is Alan Partridge. And so he kind of had that. And we had this idea of, I suggested that one of us should be a little bit in awe of the other.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, well, let me be a little bit in awe of you. Let me kind of suck up to you a little bit. So we kind of, I think I was very proud of that. We had some fun on it.
I mean, people should pay for and watch the entire movie. You should stream it and rent it. It's probably $2.99. But that said, if you must, that scene is available on YouTube. But it is certainly worth watching. I want to talk a little bit about a couple television shows that I reviewed is not right because we only reviewed shows that we loved. So the idea was if we're talking about them, we loved it. I don't know how many people here saw Feud on FX, where you played Robert Aldrich, and I mean, you were so good in this. And that's Joan Crawford and Betty Davis in the Whatever Happened to Baby Jane story. How does that come about? How are things different on television, or once the cameras start rolling, is there no difference?
My view has always been that it's not that different, really. I mean, circumstances are different in as much as you might have more time, or because of the through line of series, you've got an ongoing storyline, so you're not required to kind of finish everything in a scene. You can leave things hanging. So there is joy in doing that, but it was the best part for me was doing all the research, kind of reading about Robert Aldrich, watching his movies, and I came away before we even started filming. I came away really impressed with this man. He was a a lot of people say he was a kind of journeyman director. He directed films in almost any genre. Westerns, war films, comedies, all sorts.
No, he was like directing you.
Well, yeah, he was kind. Well, thank you very much. And I just loved his work ethic, and I read this wonderful book. There's a collection of interviews. It's a collection of all the interviews he gave over his career, and it's interesting how talking about the same film over let's say a 25 year period, how his view of his work changed, how he became less precious about it and was able to see the mistakes, and a man who clearly was keen to kind of keep on working, keep on learning. And the fact that he came from a very posh family, gave up all kinds of wonderful privileges to go and work in the mailroom in a studio in Hollywood. I mean, he was imbued in film, soaked in it. Fascinating man.